Welcome to the first episode of Commander Central, formerly Commander Masterclass, aka the CMC. The first thing our longtime listeners have probably noticed is our name change. Luke Whitten, our former partner in crime at the CMC, has moved on from the show for personal reasons. Luke helped create the CMC and was a huge part of any success we had, and Max and I didn't feel comfortable continuing with the same name without him. Luke did some great work here, and we will miss his contributions.
Yeah, and we would also like to congratulate Luke and his now fiance on their recent engagement that happened during our hiatus this summer, and we just wish them the best of luck in their lives together.
For new listeners, or for those who have just forgotten, we're going to take a minute to introduce ourselves. I am Dana Roach. I'm a writer for EDH Rec, where you may have seen some of my articles under the title In the Margins. I am exclusively pretty much a Commander player. I might play Standard once in a while or Draft, but my focus is almost entirely on EDH, where I tend to build gimmicky decks around a single theme.
And I'm Max. I have been playing since the original Innistrad block. I'm a 95% EDH player, and the other 5% hangs around just keeping tabs on standard and modern. And when it comes to EDH, I stick to my two-color decks just because I feel most comfortable there.
And hello, everyone. I am Chris. How would I say I am? I'm 25, something like that, between standard, modern, EDH,
you
Draft.
Play way more of other formats than we do, for sure.
Yes, I do. Describe myself, I guess I can just say I'm a stay-at-home dad who loves to hang out with his kid and do magic.
Well, Chris, welcome to the podcast. Max, welcome back to the podcast. A few times on our previous show, we had described ourselves as having a goal of trying to help you get better at whatever it is you do in Commander, and that really isn't going to change. We're still going to kind of focus on the same things we did before, trying to have fun as we improve our games and whatever those games might be. So let's get started. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm exhausted.
From GP Minneapolis.
Yeah.
As am I. How about you, Chris?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Aside from the fact that I pulled the grill out yesterday, grilled up some brats, walked outside with my grill in the yard, and it started raining, so I had to grill in the rain.
That isn't a good time.
Yeah.
But
food was still good.
Well, and you couldn't go, Chris couldn't go to GP Minneapolis this year. He had planned on attending.
Yeah.
But why couldn't you couldn't you go?
We'll go back to introducing myself. I'm a huge car fanatic as well. I have a 79 Camaro, and I decided to whip some donuts in a parking lot and got pulled over and got a $300 ticket out of it.
So Chris was paying his ticket instead of going to GP Minneapolis.
Yes, indeed.
And that's way less fun. I will tell a story from this morning.
This morning, interesting.
This happened, so neither of you guys are aware of this. I went out. My son and I went out yesterday to catch some Pokemon. The legendary ones are out, so I took him out, and there was one he couldn't get, Moltres, one of the legendary ones.
The fire one?
Yep, the fire one. I caught it, he couldn't. So this morning, the local Pokemon group, someone mentioned there's a raid for Moltres. I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll run over there with my phone. I'll log in as him, see if I can grab it for him quick. It was a church over downtown. So I went over there, met a group. There was probably a dozen people waiting. We started it up, and like midway through the fight, somebody comes fast walking outside. What are you guys all doing out here? And everyone's trying to like, well, we're playing Pokemon Go. We don't know. We'll be done in just a few minutes. We're just on the sidewalk.
Yep.
Well, it winds up being, it wasn't a church. It was a former church. It's now a daycare.
Oh.
And someone had reported there's a bunch of adults outside with cameras out taking pictures through the windows.
Wow. Okay, then.
So once we explained that we're not just a bunch of freaks outside like filming through the daycare's windows with our phones, we're playing a game. She's like, oh, okay, we'll just finish up and maybe you guys probably shouldn't come back here during the day when there's children in the school.
Oh, you almost need to Google where you're going next time and see what it is.
Well, it was a former Methodist church. We assumed it was still a church. No one like looked on the other side where you could see that it was, Sunnyside Daycare or whatever it was. And there was no kids anywhere. No one assumed.
That is hilarious.
So yeah, that was my my morning story. Was someone being afraid there was a pack of pedophiles at 10 a.m. outside a daycare.
Wow. That's intense for a Monday.
Yeah, that's a good way to start the week after.
Oh, it is Monday, isn't it?
It is indeed. So, Max, what do you have for us? Any news this week?
We do have news. We're recording this on Monday, August 7th. Spoilers have officially begun for Commander 17, but we're going to wait till next week to record our full Commander 17 show, and you'll hear that the following week. We might try to get that out on release day, the 25th.
Sure.
Otherwise, you'll hear it the Monday after.
Sounds good. Any listener feedback, Chris?
Yes, we do. We have it from @Grubfellow, who wrote, I cannot emphasize enough just how excited I am for you guys to be back in business. Best of luck. @Grubfellow, also known as Dean Gooty. If I did your name wrong, come harass me about it. I'm perfectly content with it. He was the first person to ever contact us on the show, so it seems appropriate to read this comment for the first show here. Thanks, Dean. We're glad to be back. You can reach us at capital CMDR Central at Twitter. Search us up on Facebook at Commander Central, and search us up on Instagram at Commander Central.
So, how about games we played this week? Anything cool happen? Now, I saw Chris played a bunch of games with a bunch of people that you didn't usually play with.
Oh, I played a lot of them. So much that I could take a whole episode to describe everything that happened in every game.
So, give us one cool one.
I guess the best one that I played was against a fellow who was playing Kalia. And I played him twice. And the very first game, I got dragged into the whole Kalia's bad, kill her immediately.
Sure.
So I nuked him out playing my Ural the Mistwalker deck. Didn't let him do anything. So we sat down for the second game, in which I was playing your Glissa deck.
Okay.
Which is a little slow, dirtily.
Right.
I mean, you can't just like go all out on someone. And he ended up getting stuck on like 5 lands with Dark Depths out.
Okay.
So the other 2 players were just nuking him hard because the Dark Depths are all scared of Dark Depths, which I really wasn't in a Kalia deck, to be honest with you. So I ended up exsanguinating out the other players. At this point, I had Mimic Vat on the field. I had the Flipping Grook. I can't think of what his name actually is. Relentless, with a token on the field. He ended up playing a wonderful card on me called Overwhelming Splendor. Now, for those of you who don't know, that is a 6 colorless double white, and it's an Aura Curse.
Oh, yeah, the new one.
It says that creatures enchanted player controls loses all abilities and have base power 1/1, base power and toughness. An enchanted player can activate abilities that aren't mana abilities or loyalty abilities. Now you're thinking to yourself, well, this is no biggie. You can do that, all that. Well, not when you have Necropotence out.
So you can't even draw.
I can't even draw.
So you lose your draw step, and you can't draw.
And I can't, I can't do anything. So at this time, he ends up playing Kalia, brings out a Resolute Archangel, goes back up to 40. So I'm like, okay, whatever. You know, I had a whole bunch of life from Exsanguinate, so it's no biggie. Then he played, I do believe it's called a Dragon Mage Dragon.
So like
is that the name of it?
Yeah, Dragon Mage, which is like a wheel. When he hits, he wheels.
Yep. Well, he hits me to wheel. I'm like, okay, cool. I can get out of this now. So I Vampiric Tutor up the Hailfire of Torment.
Yeah, Torment of Hailfire.
Torment of Hailfire. Pardon me for mispronouncing that. So I get that off the wheel. So then I cast that on my next turn with the Cabal Coffers Urborg combo, so I have tons of mana. I end up forcing him to sack out the enchantment. Cool. So now I'm all in golden now. Yep, right? That's what you're thinking. Yeah. No. Next turn he drops Iona and names Black.
Oh, no.
So at this point I had Mimic Vatted Sidisi.
Oh, sure.
So instead I didn't have to cast it, so it's not a black spell. So I made a token of Sidisi, extorted the 1/1 wolf that I had to tutor up Triangle of War, which I played
colorless
to fight Sidisi versus Iona to kill Iona. So then I could play Yawgmoth's Will and then exsanguinate him to death again.
That's extremely intricate.
Man, there's a lot of stuff happening there. That's awesome.
Yeah, so to everyone who's listening, don't ever give up when you're playing. Look at all your outs. Don't just scoop up your cards and quit.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Max and I had a really dumb game at the card shop.
Oh, lordy.
That wound up, and I'm not even going to attempt to recreate the factors involved because it wound up with us both casting infinite copies of Clone Legion
against a mono green player who had everything you could imagine on his board.
Yeah, and we were able to like copy Eternal Witness infinite times as part of the Clone Legion to bring back our entire graveyards for hands, and we made infinite creatures, and
Infinite Hornet Queens.
with infinite tokens. And what wound up happening was then we killed the other two players because we had infinite creatures, essentially. So we killed the other two players, and it was Max and I. And we basically said, let's see who top decks Rift first.
You guys are a bunch of bullies. What is going on?
The thing was, it wasn't us that enabled it. It was there was a Jaleva player whose Clone Legion it was, and it was the green player whose I think it was Green Ward and Marasa let us bring our stuff back. So it was my Chance for the Spires that was able to cast Clone Legion, and Max was able to copy that with his. So it took all 4 players to make this happen for Max and I.
Phyrexian Metamorph copied the Chancellor, and it just kept going back and forth.
So it was a true team effort. The entire game conspired to allow infinite Clone Legion casts. But we were the only two that they got to take the advantage of it.
Right, and that was... After that game, I'm like, I'm done. I'm going home because I couldn't think straight anymore.
Well, we didn't even attempt to represent the boards. They were just like, well, we have infinite stuff, so I guess you can't attack me and I can't attack you, so let's just see who flips a Cyclonic Rift first.
I think it would be awesome if Wizards would make us a die with the infinite symbol on it.
Right.
For like tokens or something. You can
purpose.
just set it there and say, okay, this represents my tokens or whatever else.
All the tokens in the world. How about you, Max? Any other interesting games that you were involved in?
That would be the one I can remember from the shop, and I'm sure we'll talk about more when we get into GP Minneapolis.
Oh, you're thinking ahead now, aren't you?
Way
I
too
heard
far
that little
ahead.
stutter on Vegas there.
Thinking ahead to next year already. Well, I'll mention, since you kind of mentioned that, we played a game. I played a lot of games at GP Minneapolis this weekend, but one of them was played against Patrick Sapola, a.k.a. at Detective Yarmus. He is one of the hosts of the excellent Commander Time podcast, and he's also a writer at EDH Rec. We had made arrangements to meet up and play a few games at the GP, and so he came down on Saturday
morning
and played 2 games with Max and I. I've talked to Patrick quite a bit on Slack in the last 6 months. He's always seemed like a very nice and intelligent person, and meeting him in person, he was that and more. He was a great guy, and we had a really good time playing with him.
Yeah.
It's super cool to talk to somebody and think, oh, this person will probably be nice in person to meet, and then have them be that and more is always a pretty pleasant thing to have happen. We played two games. The first one was Brago. You played Brago both games, didn't you?
No, I played Dramoka
the first game. Dramoka against Patrick's
Brea.
And it was the artifact-y Brea deck. I don't think it was not eggsy and it wasn't dirtily, so
No.
it was. And then I played my Sphinx deck, and you and Patrick both kicked off really fast.
Oh, Sphinx is my nemesis.
Well, and they both started. Max was blinking Hornet Queen multiple times, and then Patrick was copying it. I think he had followed footsteps out, so there was just a disgusting amount of Hornet tokens on both sides.
And you were just left in the dust.
Well, yeah, and they kind of were leaving me alone a little bit because they were fighting back and forth, and I wound up. Was it a rift or a washout or something?
You rifted me and killed me with combat damage.
Okay, and then I was able to get ahead of him with a Madomi and take the extra turn and then have enough Sphinx bodies to get through on him. And we played a second game that was really fast. That was your Brago game.
Yep.
And Max cheated in that one, I'm pretty sure, I think is what.
I'm sure I did because I don't even remember how I won that game.
I was playing... Patrick was playing a Marin Relentless Rats deck.
Yep.
And I was playing my Rith token deck, and everything went really fast, but I think...
He played Concordant Crossroads.
Yeah,
that's what
it was.
helped.
So everyone was just beating each other up, and then at some point Brago just flipped out and just made all the things and killed us both. We had a really good time. I will segue into this. Patrick made a suggestion jokingly, or I did, one of us. We were all talking about how Max should make a second Brago deck that's King Tribal and not tell anyone. And so just you never know if he's playing his real Brago deck or if he's playing Brago King Tribal.
Same box, same sleeves, same everything.
I never thought of anything like that.
Well, I went and looked it up. So
okay.
So how many legal kings would there be in a Brago deck?
So king in the title?
King in the title, yeah, because there's no king subtype, so it would be king in the title. They'll be legal.
9.
What do you get, Chris?
I'm going to guess towards the 20 range.
Can you think of any of them off the top of your head?
Bermaz.
Bermaz is one. There's 3.
Oh.
Bermaz, King of Ereskos. There's Darien, King of Keldar, and King Suleiman. And if you wanted to go flavor purposes, you also have King Crab, Sea King's Blessing, and Chicken a la King. And if you want to go that wouldn't be in Brago colors, there's Goblin King, King Makar the Gold Cursed, Meng-Ho Barbarian King, Reaper King, and Solknar the Swamp King.
Okay, yep. I totally spaced even thinking of staying in color with Brago neither. I just was thinking kings in general.
So if you're talking total kings, there's 8. And then you have a couple goofy ones like King Cheetah and then Unsith Killer of Kings for equipment.
I suppose you could do other equipment or other artifacts like the Dragon Throne of Tarkir.
Right,
It's a
yeah,
throne.
yes.
And
There's a lot of Queen Marchesa, find a way. So
Yep.
for your 5-color royalty deck, there's enough stuff you could do.
Good
So
to know.
Have that made by next week, and we'll talk about how well it worked.
Sure, I'll get right on that.
So we've mentioned GP Minneapolis here a little bit, and that's kind of the plot of today's story. We're going to talk about playing Commander at a Grand Prix. The reason we're going to talk about this is because I think there's a bit of an assumption among Commander players that people don't play Commander at GPs. And there's probably a reason for that. I'll let Max give you the official synopsis of what a GP is.
Yeah, so from Wizards, Grand Prix are the biggest open Magic events ran all over the world. They're usually 3-day festivals that feature a 2-day main event, usually in some sort of constructed format and sometimes limited or team limited. And then there's also side events and artists and vendors that you can peruse while you're there.
In their official description on their website, at no point does Commander get mentioned at all.
Which I find weird because they're now kind of verifying that Commander's a format with their new like online and the ban lists that they've been putting out and all that kind of stuff for like 1v1.
Yeah, it's a strange thing to skip over, particularly because there's actually Commander side events there.
Right.
So if you're a Commander-only player who thinks GPs don't have anything for you, they have plenty of things for Commander players. Some things you can't get anywhere else that are really, really cool and worth your time. So I think we're going to talk about being a Commander player, but going to a GP and what you can do and things you should know. So an easy start-off point here is the fact that as we mentioned, there are official site events where you can sign up. I think it's $10 usually was the entry fee this time.
GP Minneapolis for a 4-player Commander pod was $10, and then what happens is all the side events, you get prize tickets for the prize wall, which you can redeem for packs, T-shirts, sealed product, the big uncut poster of the foil cards, random stuff like that.
And I believe in the Commander pods, you at minimum get enough tickets for 1 pack.
Yep. Every player gets 20 tickets, and then the winner receives an additional 40.
So, I mean, best case, or worst case, you are getting 2 packs for your $10.
Yep.
And then you have an okay chance at getting more
6,
than that.
yeah.
So we've all played in these official Commander pods at different points. Chris didn't play this year, but you played last year.
I did play last
in
year.
At least one. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what can you expect as a Commander player if you go play in one of the official pods at a GP? So what were your experiences, Max, when you've done this?
Don't expect everybody to judge power level.
For
and
sure.
This is my opinion, and I've kind of have realized this. If I'm paying $10 to play Commander for essentially 3 to 6 packs of product, I'm going to bring my number one deck or one of your guys' number one decks that I enjoy playing because I want the best chance at winning, but still having fun.
So you're treating it, when you come down, you're not treating it like playing with friends on a Sunday night or goofing around. You're going to bring your strong deck regardless of what everybody else has.
Right.
Is that kind of how you view it, Chris?
I do view it that way.
I kind of do too in that environment. Like, I don't necessarily think I'm going to go super, super hard, but I played my strongest deck the last time I played in the pod there, so that was my assumption as well. However, don't expect everyone to have that mindset. I think in both the pods you guys played, I remember you guys commenting you had some really casual decks that also got played.
Yes, I would agree with that. It was in my pod, 4 people. One guy had a super powerful deck, I had a super powerful deck, and the other 2 were not quite that good.
I think at that point, though, I don't think you need... It's different than playing at your shop with a new player with that pre-con attracts deck. I don't think you necessarily have to feel as bad as you would at your shop because you all paid $10. You all brought what you had.
I think it creates I think then you get weird situations where it's kind of not fun then when you have that one person who can't contribute at all to the game because they can't. Like one of the pods I played in last year was 3 really competitive decks and someone with a pre-con of some sort, and they weren't in the game. I mean, like, there was a game happening between the other 3 players and the other person was at like 4 lands and doing nothing. So that also kind of, you get weird situations like that. But then again, I think you two had some really fun games too, where everyone had some balanced decks and it wound up being a good time. So it's kind of a crapshoot. Beyond that, though, like one of the cool things about a GP is there are so many people there that even if your thing is not sitting down and playing in a competitive pod, you can just find games everywhere.
Constantly.
And in that case, then it was much easier to say, hey, what are you guys playing strength-wise? So I can play the appropriate deck. And then you can get some really fun pods and you get to play with people you would never, ever play with. And even at your local store, like if you're playing with people that aren't normally your play group, they've probably played with someone in your play group, or it gets a bit incestuous even if you're playing with semi-strangers in your game store. Here you could be playing with people from 1,000 miles away. You can see some totally different stuff. I think that's a really, really valuable. It's fun, and it's useful to you as a player to see decks and play styles and things you don't normally see.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% because it'll help you in your further deck building.
Yeah,
you'll
absolutely.
see little niches as to this card goes with this, and you're like, I never thought about that before.
Right. You brought up Patrick's Marin deck, which was all Relentless Rats.
I've never seen that.
Right. I saw him shoot out Marin, and I instantly went to combo Marin, shenanigans Marin, and all of a sudden it's like, rat. I'm hitting you for 20. I'm like, oh, okay.
Quickly, too.
Never mind.
I immediately was assuming that we'd see Sakura Tribe Elder, followed by Spore Frog, followed by, the usual Marin stuff that self-sacks that you can replay and start creating just Value Town. That was cool seeing rats. So that to me is one of my favorite parts about a GP is you get a collection of people you never see anywhere else. But that's also weird because at your local meta, things eventually usually kind of coalesce around a certain power level, and you have to be really careful in an environment like this to make sure you don't wind up just pub stomping some people that don't know what they're doing. Because that was one of my observations. I feel like despite the fact that we all treat our decks as relatively casual, our decks are much more tuned than the average player's deck is.
I completely agree with that. We, in the past, Dana and I have talked about the other play group we play with maybe once a month on a Sunday night, and removal is not the forte of that play group. They just like playing big spells and letting them stick. I noticed that a lot at the GP too. It's a lot of big spell.
More often than not, that has been my experience in playing outside our play group, is when something hits the board, the attitude is, oh, well, that's there forever.
That's a really cool card.
I guess that's permanently part of the game state now. And when you start removing things repeatedly and flowing the game, everyone seems kind of shocked at that it just happened.
I do think, though, that creates a boring game state, honestly. Like when you drop a Sylvan Library or a Phyrexian Arena turn 2, turn 3, and it stays forever, and you get all that advantage,
Absolutely.
I think it makes the game boring.
Absolutely. I actually hit a point in one of the games I played where there was no removal, where I think it was my Recce deck, and I had a Vernal Bloom and a Mana Reflection out and a Nykthos because no one was removing anything. And I didn't know what to do with my mana. I had like 20 mana per turn that I couldn't spend fast enough because no one would remove anything. And then you get a few gummed up board states then where everyone's just playing stuff and no one's removing anything, and it's a stalemate until somebody hits a big blowout spell. But that's just I think some metas just run that way.
Yeah.
See, when I personally build one, I build my EDH to be more like how I build Standard and Modern. You need your fair amount of removal, fair amount of card draw, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm just curious. I would like to see the environment a lot of these people playing at home. I mean, not in a bad way. I'm just curious to see what the eventual win condition is, or how someone wins those games. Maybe it's just eventually someone hits an insurrection, and that's what their win con is an insurrection eventually, or that kind of spell.
That could be, or they're playing combo base. I know the group that we
Slow
play
combos.
with who doesn't play a whole lot of removal. I know they don't play the infinite combo base, but some decks could just, that's how they're used to playing, is just stick, combo, I win.
Right.
Yep.
And they're not fast combos. They're slow 4-card combos that they just eventually build up to because nothing ever goes away. But it's interesting to see, like, just to see the other players play. I find that really useful to watch people I don't know from different places play, and that's one of the cool things about just staying outside of GP at the entry and just say, hey, are you playing Commander? Are you playing Commander?
Right. What I tend to do at GPs, I find GPs push me out of my comfort level, where typically we like to stay in the 3 to 4 player pods.
Yeah.
At GPs, I feel okay playing 5, 6, 7 player games, even though I know they're going to take forever.
Sure.
But since we don't like doing it at home, it really lets me see how my deck holds up in the long run of a 8-player game.
That's a good point.
Now, if you guys sit down at the GP, now how you were talking about how you just stomp someone out of the game, do you slow play it then if you notice that?
I completely, I was very, very cautious this time to say, the first thing to say is, so what's the power level of everyone's decks involved here?
Yep.
And I intentionally, I never brought any of my strong decks out the entire weekend. Sphinxes was the strongest deck I probably played at any point.
My nemesis.
I kind of went off of Dana's queue in the few games I joined in with, and I only brought 2 or 3 decks with me, so I tried to stay away from Brago just because I didn't want to be the Rift Lock guy on the table.
And there was a game I wound up playing with a couple of 12-year-old kids that were clearly playing, like, they were very budget limited, and they were super nice. So I played my Recce deck, and I was very intentionally not playing the big turns of creature into a draw into creature into draw into, building up the huge board state.
Chroma's Memorial, and guess what? You're all dead.
I gave them, and I eventually did wind up killing them both because at some point I had to.
It had to happen.
Yeah. But like the game went an hour at that point, and they had a good time and it was fun, and I eventually wound up killing one of them with, it wasn't even an overrun. It was, I used the Green God, the new Ronus. I used Ronus to pump up a forest walking Azuri to kill one person, and then I had a forest walking the cat
Miri.
No,
Judith
O'Hannon.
Well, you didn't even give him a chance because they couldn't even block then.
So I'd been taking a bunch of flying damage too at that point, but I'm like, eventually I just pumped up my guys and wound up killing them in a couple turns. But they were super nice, and they were really thankful to play. And I actually gave them a couple cards for the decks. I gave the Tristani kid a what's the horse? I forgot its name now. The Sunmare.
You just told me earlier too.
Sunmare.
The new one?
Yeah, I gave him the Crested Sunmare, and I gave the kid who was playing a Mina and Den deck a Valkut. Because it's like
as I said to you earlier when you were telling me this, you gave him a Valkut. Now he's gonna go home, and all his friends are gonna hate him.
He's just gonna wreck him with it.
Before they joined in to play with Dana, the kid, I'm assuming one of them, got super excited because I think he spent all the money he saved up and he got a Sylvan Library. I saw him run back with a 4th edition Sylvan Library, and he was big smile on his face. I'm like, see, that's how I am when I buy my fancy cards.
Well, and the kid with the Trostani deck, after we got the Crested Sunmare, he's like, I was thinking about buying one of these, but now I have enough money to get a what's the Anointed Procession in green? Parallel Lives.
Parallel Lives.
So you went running back into the GP and came out with the Parallel Lives. I got a Parallel Lives now. I'm like, all right, cool. So they were super. And then they sat and played with.
I'm glad to see how young they are. They know what cards that they need to go for.
They did, yeah. Well, and then the one kid who was playing the Minen and Den deck, he sat with another friend of ours who was basically just goldfishing his Modern deck. And he's like, I've got a Modern deck. Can we play Modern? And he's like, sure. So the two of them played like 3 or 4 Modern matches. And he was giving, the kid, the 12-year-old, was giving our friend advice for his Modern deck that he took. He's like, that's a really good point. I'm going to change that. It was cool. He was smart, and they were both nice kids. So like that was awesome. That was cool to see young people playing Commander.
I'd love to play games with kids, whether it be card games, board games, whatever, because their mind works in a completely different level than it does as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
They see things from a different point of view.
Yes, it's amazing what they'll do, and it's just like, wait, what?
And just seeing someone get excited for a Sylvan Library, yeah, that's great.
I get excited for Sylvan Library.
Yeah, so do I.
I only have like 2.
Dana, you were excited last week at the card shop when you're like, what pack should I buy? What pack should I buy? And you buy it, and you just like flip through like, oh yeah, Sylvan Library.
Nice. So beyond games, there's other stuff at a GP besides just playing in the pods and playing with people you see. One of my favorite things, and the thing that soaked up a ton of my time this week, is getting new cards for decks, since we're talking about that. I mean, you can jump on TCG Player or Card Kingdom or whatever and like buy whatever card you want, assuming you have cash in hand. What you can do to GP is find all of those vendors and trade in cards you don't need or aren't using to get credit or cash towards cards you want.
Now, how many vendors were there this year? I do believe last year there was 10 vendors.
There was more this year. There was
probably 15.
Yeah.
15? Or just so for a basic for everyone who's listening, so you know basically how many are there. And
Yep.
Yeah. And they all have big areas that have thousands of cards out in cases to look at. I mean, more than you probably see at your local game store. And they have nothing but gas out. I mean, there's a... And one thing I noticed this year, there was a lot of EDH stuff in those cabinets.
Tons.
I'm not sure if that's because Standard has kind of had a rough year, so there's not a lot of interest, or if they've realized that there's a lot of EDH players that want shiny foils, but there was a ton of EDH foils out, a ton of old cards in the cases, just a lot of cool stuff.
I actually want to preface, this is the reason, so Dana and I and Chris, our initial plan was to go up Thursday night, GP starts Friday, and the reason was because we wanted to get to the vendors right away on Friday, so the buy list prices were the highest, best chance at seeing what we wanted to see. Versus last year, we didn't hit them till Saturday morning, and not that they didn't look picked over, but who knows what we would have saw the day before.
Right.
yeah, I don't think I even hit them till Sunday last year.
And we wound up spending hours, like 4 or 5 hours, I did at least.
Each day.
Yeah. Just talking to vendors and like looking at stuff and digging through boxes and making deals, and Max traded in a ton of stuff too. You're like, hey, can I, like at one point you had 10 Eternal Witnesses or something ridiculous and a bunch of Riftic studies.
Yeah.
And
I have to talk about that later.
all right. So, well, let's talk about that. I mean, so Max, you did a ton of trading. What was your experience, or is there any advice you have for getting good deals? Let's talk about picking up EDH cards at a GP from a vendor.
So I'll start with my advice. Plan ahead.
Yeah.
Like, have a list of the primary 20 things you know you want. So last year when we went, I was starting to foil out my Dragon Lord Jamoka deck. This year, that deck is almost complete, so I'm starting to foil out my Brago King Eternal deck. So I had a list of about 6 cards for Jamoka and a dozen for Brago that I knew that my local game store doesn't have them. This is my only shot. I'm going to be able to trade in all the stuff I'm not using and pick them up pretty easily.
Yep.
So I had all the cards that I knew I wanted, and I also had all the cards I knew I wanted to sell out of my binders in a Ultra Pro magnetic flip box and just in my bag.
Right, like you spent Thursday night in the hotel, spent an hour or so digging through all your binders and like, okay, these are the cards I know I want to get rid of, and you had them all in one box. So when you sat down to talk to somebody at a table, you didn't like say, hey, look through this binder. You just had this. These are the things I want to get rid of. Tell me what you will get for them.
Exactly.
And I know most vendors that I've seen, they're pretty much willing to take anything that you have, too.
Yes.
Whether it's, you may not get a whole lot for it, but if you're just looking to offload a whole bunch of bulk that you have, a lot of vendors will still do that.
And there are a lot of them that are doing that.
And some things you think you won't get a lot for, I got more than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Example, Dana brought up the Ewits a little bit ago. I traded in, one of the vendors had a foil Council's Judgment, realized I didn't have one in Brago for whatever reason, and so I traded in 10 foil Eternal Witnesses.
10 non-foil Eternal Witnesses.
10 non-foil, and I got the Council's Judgment because a lot of these vendors, my next piece of advice would be scout all the vendors before pulling any triggers.
See who has the best deal and has the cards you want.
All vendors usually give a trade-in percentage.
Yep.
So all their prices on their buy sheets are in cash, and then they give an additional 20, 30% for extra trading credit. And then I went with that and said, okay, these people are giving 30. Do they have what I want? Versus starting at the very end saying, oh, they're not giving any trade-in percentage. And there was one vendor that didn't do a bonus.
Yep.
Which irked me, but whatever. And then, check their hot buy sheets. Most of the vendors just don't do standard. They have modern and legacy, and that's what, as EDH guys, we collect those cards because
they're legal to play.
They're legal to play. And that's why I handed a guy, I think I handed Ultra Reality Games a stack of 10 Ewits, and they're like, okay, cool.
Right, and what are you going to do with 10 Eternal Witnesses?
I'm not.
Right, exactly. I mean, like, you might want to keep a couple, but, like, you don't need that many.
You could start a collection, just like your Megantic Slivers.
No, right, one card at a time.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what I did too. I mean, I traded in less stuff than you did, and I got less stuff than you did. I basically did the same thing. My main acquisition was I wanted a moat. So I basically went through and asked every vendor who has a moat. Come up with the condition, looked at it, how much is it, wrote the price down, figured out who all had a moat. I went back to each of them. These are the cards I'm willing to trade in. What will you give me? Wrote that all down. Went up the aisle again, figured out what every vendor was offering me for trade in, and then went back to the place that had the difference between the best priced moat that I wanted and the best card value they offer. And then I just sat down and said, okay, I want a moat. What's going to get me there? And we, negotiated for a few minutes, and I walked away with a moat.
Yeah, because you really need one.
Sphinxes need a moat.
Oh, my nemesis.
He didn't even get to play it in the game with Patrick.
The game with Patrick.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Brea Dramoka game. Dramoka's all flyers on top of it. And I had moat in my opening hand and never cast it because there was never a point when it wasn't all flyers in play.
I understand that.
The worst part was I had Magus of the moat in my opening hand.
Max had Magus in his opening hand and never played it.
So last bit of my little advice would be when making transactions, be polite. These guys are there from Thursday night till late Sunday night on their feet all day doing, granted they do this for a living, but you don't have to be a jerk. Politely say, hey, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Another thing is if you're walking through the vendors and you see this vendor has a Invention Soul Ring for 175 and everybody else has them at 200. Just ask, hey, I'm interested in that. Can I look at it? Can you hold it because I'm about to get in line to sell cards?
Oh, yeah.
90% of the time they said, yeah, no problem. The only time I ran into that was, no, it's my only one.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, well, hopefully I just don't lose out on it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that makes sense completely.
And I would also say don't be afraid to negotiate a little bit. Like, there was I bought or I got it in trade, I think it was an In the Eye of Chaos, which is an old enchantment from Legends, and it was priced at $45, and I had gotten $40 in trade value for whatever it was I traded in, and that was the card I wanted. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, it's a little bit more played than I want. I'm like, how about 40? And they did that, well, I don't know, and we went back and forth, and then he's finally agreed to take it for 40. And so I got my card for what I traded in, and we walked away. Now, that cost me, at no point is a vendor going to say, screw you, man, get out of here for wanting $5 less for it. All they'll maybe say is, no, I can't go less than that. And that's it. It's worth your 10 seconds to ask, because the worst they'll say is no, and the best they'll say is sure, and you save $5. So don't be afraid to negotiate prices a little bit as well.
I've noticed that with other vendors that I've done. Even around here locally, we'll have big tournaments and vendors will come down. And I've traded in cards, and you're sitting at $10 difference between everything. And you're like, well, will you do just that card then? And they'll and haw a little bit about it, and then they'll be like, you know what? Yeah, because all they want to do is just flip their stock.
Right.
Get stuff in that people want and get rid of stuff that people aren't really looking for.
And you can, what's cool about it too is just being able to, if you're buying something online, you don't get to, number one, see the condition of the card. You can't really look and see, because sometimes with foils, you never know if it's going to be a good foil, if it's going to look good, or if it's going to be all cloudy, or if the actual card itself, if the foiling makes the art look terrible. Being able to see them there is a whole different thing. Hey, and maybe you can do it at your local store, but for a lot of, for a 10-year-old foil or something, the odds of your game store having that original border Mother of Runes and foil is pretty slim. But I saw a couple of them at the GP.
Did you get any?
I didn't. I actually had one.
Oh, really?
And I traded it away as part of a deal to get something. I don't even remember what it was. I think it might have been In the Eye of Chaos. But yeah, being able to see all the cards there is really, really useful. So I would say it's worth it if you're a Commander player, particularly if you're somebody who's collecting foils or looking for old stuff. And that costs you nothing. If the GP is near you, if it's within driving distance,
go for the day.
You got to pay to go and to look through vendor stuff. You just walk in and do all of that and find some cool cards. I would highly recommend going for that reason alone.
Agreed.
How about this? Every time I've left a GP, I've left saying, next year, I'm going to do this differently. So what generic advice do you guys have for going to a GP? And this doesn't have to be just Commander, because we've also played in standard
main events
and stuff. So what advice do you have for people that are just going to these events?
Well, this is kind of a little off topic of this, but I'm going to rag on Max a little bit on this. But a big thing I would say is always check your hotel room before you leave.
Well, you can rag on me because I left a pair of pants in the hotel room last year.
Oh, that's right, you did.
Yeah, so that's been both of us that have been guilty of that.
The reason Chris brings that up is Saturday night of the GP, the guy that runs our LGS throws a message into this Facebook group we're all in that everybody that went to the GP, and he says, "Is anybody still there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm at dinner, but I'm going to be there tomorrow." He said, "Call me." Well, from a vendor, he bought the San Diego Comic-Con Nicole Bowles poster.
Okay,
He goes, and I left it because he was playing in the main event. He bought it right when they got there. He said, "I left it at the vendor. Can you go pick it up?" I said, "Sure, I'll grab it in the morning. I don't think the vendors are open past 9. We're at dinner, So I pick up the poster in the morning, carried it around with me all day, and Dana and I waited to do our side events that we got with our mega badge till Sunday morning, and we're getting short on time, so we rush back to the hotel. I pack super fast. We rush out the room because checkout's in like 3 minutes.
Right.
We check out. We get the valet to get our car. We stop for gas about half an hour out of the cities, and I'm like, I don't have the poster. So I frantically call the hotel. I'm like, I think I either left it in front of the front desk when checking out or at the valet station. They're like, no, it's not either of those. So I think it was left in my room, and I haven't heard back from the hotel. So I just told the owner of the shop, it's like, I'll just buy you a new one off of eBay. He's like, oh, no problem. Thank you. I feel bad. He's like, no, I should have remembered too. It's on both of us. I'm like, well, I'm the one who really left it there.
So Chris's advice is don't leave stuff behind, and you have to buy a poster.
I have more, but I want to hear what you guys' other advice is. Sorry about that, Max. Had to bring that one up.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Well, the first one I'll say is bring a water bottle and bring snacks. You're going to be there all day. Like, even if you're not playing the main event, you're probably going to be there a long time. But if you are playing the main event, you're definitely going to be there a long time. And it's a convention center, and it has dry convention center air, and you're going to wind up paying $10 for a crappy basket of chicken fingers and another $4 for a Coke, or you can just drink clean water from your water bottle that you can refill at a drinking fountain, and have a snack that actually gives you energy versus just makes you weighed down.
Yep.
So I would really recommend bringing something like that for a snack.
I would agree with that, especially if you are playing in the main event because of all the time constraints. You don't really have time to go run and get food or go run and get something to drink or anything. You need it on you.
Main event, you absolutely need to do that.
And if you're worried, hopefully you're going with people, or at least one other person. Be a team. Hey, you're done before I am. Here's $5. Go get me a soda. If you absolutely have to do that.
Right.
We did that a lot last year.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember that, sitting in a game, and when you guys came up behind me and said, hey, you want something? I'm like, yeah, why don't you grab me something to drink? And you're like, yeah, I'll go get it for you.
Yep.
Even this year, us not playing in main events, there was times when I'd see somebody crack open that granola bar, and I'm like, man, I should have brought a granola bar today. I didn't. So yeah, you're just there a long time, and the food is expensive, and the drinks are expensive, and pack your own.
Something else I'd recommend on the side of food is, I'm assuming you're staying in a hotel. The last 2 years we've gone to GP Minneapolis, the hotels don't do a breakfast.
Yep.
So you gotta plan your meals. Google what's near you. Oh, look, Jimmy John's delivers to the convention center. Luckily, downtown Minneapolis, everything's within 6 blocks of walking from the convention center or our hotel. So we just had to think ahead. Plan out where you want to eat. Know that you can't go when the main event ends because everybody's going to be flooding to these dozen restaurants by the convention center.
And there's also probably some cities where walking 6 blocks at night to get a meal isn't a good idea.
Right.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask. I know last year was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I went downstairs to the bar in the hotel because I wanted a glass of milk. And the bartender behind the bar looked at me funny, and he's like, I will get you a glass of milk, and you can just have it on the house. I have never been asked for a glass of milk before.
At an hour before bar close.
Yep.
I remember that last year. You also had a situation where you couldn't get the beer you wanted
Anywhere.
at a bar.
Yeah. I don't know where you guys are all listening from, but here in Wisconsin, I love my Coors Light, and no bar that we went to carried Coors Light, and I was depressed.
I would expect you to, being from Wisconsin, to have said like Miller or something.
It's owned by Miller Lite.
That's true. I guess it is, isn't it?
Credit.
That's fair. One other thing I would say, that this wasn't ever an issue for us, but like secure your stuff.
Oh.
there are people walking around that I would see like talking to a vendor and clearly with thousands and thousands of dollars in cards that were really, really careless with their binders or really careless with their backpacks.
Backpack split wide open, not like
Not
on the
zipped
table.
Yeah, well, you had something similar to that last year as well, but you ran into a guy who was really nice about it.
Well, and that wasn't even that was just me being careless. I finished my match in the main event and then left my deck because you were playing against
Adrian Sullivan, who crushed me like I was nothing.
Yeah,
We all rushed up
and
there.
one of our friends came running over like, Chris is playing Adrian Sullivan, and I had just finished my match. So I'm like, oh, awesome. So I'm packing up, and I'm like, shook the guy's hand and filled up my slip and ran over to watch you play and left my deck sitting at the table. And the guy had heard us have this conversation, and he tracked me down and gave me my deck back.
Yeah, don't bank on people,
But
everyone being like
don't
that.
rely on that, right? And it was a standard deck, so it was it was maybe $150 in cards, which is not nothing, but compared to binders filled with dual lands or whatever,
Or your foiled out EDH decks.
or your foiled out EDH deck, right? I mean, you need to be cautious of that kind of stuff because at some point someone's going to dig into your backpack when you're not paying attention or slide it out from underneath you. I saw a lot of people playing games at tables with their backpack lying 3 feet away behind them. And I mean, someone at some point is going to lose backpacks where we're playing. And I've heard of other places where, cars get broken into when you leave your backpack in the car, or people get mugged in the bathroom and get their backpacks taken.
Yeah. It's a good thing you brought that up because I never really thought about that. It's just I'm a conscious person, so I always keep my stuff close to the vest anyways. But other people who are just casual don't even really think about that.
Yeah. Well, I was even wearing my backpack kind of over one shoulder backwards, so the zipper was in front of me, like under one arm, particularly the day I was doing all my trading because I had a bunch of trade stock and stuff in my backpack. So even I was really kind of super cautious about it. So yeah, just keep an eye on it.
Yeah, that is a very, very good point.
Any other big things you guys want to throw out here?
I can think of one. Maybe, I don't know if this would really relate to a whole lot of people, but don't rush yourself when you're there. Don't get anxious, rush around, tire yourself out. Just enjoy the experience.
Whether you're playing a main event or playing side games or something, yeah, take it easy.
Yep.
For sure. And because it is a long, stressful day.
And there are a lot of people there.
And there are thousands of people there. And there are GPs that are way bigger than Minneapolis. Minneapolis is probably one of the smaller ones. And there was still 3,000 people in the convention center.
1,200 played in the main event.
Yeah. I mean, yes, watch your stuff, watch yourself. So I think that's it for playing Commander at a GP. But like we always used to do, we're going to have a sign-off question here. So both Max and I found a ton of foils for our decks this week. And I kind of noticed that we both wound up liking the old border foils whenever given the option. So since we've seen not quite a few, but we've seen a couple newer cards printed with the old border in foil, a couple of swords and a Crucible Worlds, namely. Are there any new frame-only cards that you would personally love to see printed in an old border, foil or non, just to have in an old border that you think would be like the card that is crying out to be in an old border? I'll give you mine first. I want to see I think an old border Wormcoil Engine would be fantastic. It feels like such a Phyrexian card, like it belongs, like it's something from the Urza saga.
I think even if they took the Mirrodin art and just put it on the brown card.
Yeah, like it wouldn't have to be any new art, just that Mirrodin artwork with the old brown border foiled out with the sunburst on it.
Right.
Would be a gorgeous card because that's what the Crucible Worlds looks so good in that old border art. Is there anything that you are thinking of that you would like to see in that kind of?
I can't really think of off the top of my head aside from, since you're talking about foils, but what I would like to see is artifacts go back to the brown over the gray.
That works.
It's for me, having a little bit worse eyesight than most people, an artifact in the gray border, once you like colorless creature next to it, they look very similar. And then you got to really take a look and make sure, okay, that's an artifact and that's just a colorless creature.
They actually had to even shift it a little bit at one point. I don't know if it was in Mirrodin or where it was, where the white was too close to the silver.
Yeah.
And they had to then darken the silver up in subsequent printing so it was farther away from the white. So that's a actual problem they've had. Whereas for sure with the old artifact borders, you're not mistaking that brown artifact border for anything else. How about you, Max? Anything special that's jumping out at you?
So my obvious answers are going to be either my generals, Dramoka or Brago.
Okay.
But the other type of cards I would like to see are all the Theros gods in the old border.
Gods.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Any particular reason why they feel old border to you?
They just do, and I'm like, Theros, Constellation, the Starburst on them. Flavor-wise, it all works.
No, that's a great idea. I like that a lot. That's cool.
I think it would be nice if they came back with the F&M stamps as well.
I like any kind of watermark kind of card. I like.
We discussed that at length this weekend.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I like the F&M watermark too. Some people, I like the
DCI watermark.
Yes,
I do too. I don't even mind the date stamp on pre-release stuff. Some people hate that.
I got a lot of cheap cards because of that date stamp this weekend.
And I prefer the date stamp on there because it's a little bit harder to come by than it would be a regular foil.
Well, it's also like a one-at-a-time thing. Like if they can reprint any card at any point, and anything that has a date stamp is reprintable. But there's only ever going to be that one release version with that date stamp on it. So like right now, it might mean anything, but in 15 years or 20 years, when that one card has been reprinted 4 times, you've got the only foil version that has that original date stamp from that original release.
Correct.
So I kind of like that about it. All right. Well, I think that is it for tonight. We'll be back next week. The plan is to do the full Commander 2017 preview. For now, I am Dana.
And I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.